Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast that explores the human side of financial planning. I'm Danny George, Head of Business here in the Middle East for St James's Place. And today we're talking about a subject that's on the minds of many professionals, early retirement. What does it actually take to stop working earlier? And how do you prepare, not just financially, but emotionally, and then practically? I'm delighted to say joining me today is David Gardner, Senior Partner of St James's Place, who's been an advisor for over 18 years, working with clients across the UK, Singapore, and now Dubai. David has seen firsthand the opportunities and challenges expats face when planning for retirement, and he's passionate about helping people make those ambitions a reality. David, welcome. Perhaps you could start by telling us, what inspired you to be an advisor? And then, what is it about helping clients that really makes your job so fulfilling?
Thanks, Danny. What inspired me to become a financial planner was I wanted to do something which was related to my degree. So I graduated with a degree in economics, and after I graduated, I spent a year in Sydney in Australia. And when I came back to the UK, so it would have been 24, 25, I sought roles then in the financial advisory industry. I got all my UK qualifications, and then I applied then to become an IFA, an independent financial advisor. And the feedback was really, really positive. The feedback was really good. It was, you're really good with people. You've got all the qualifications. But the problem back then is I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the grey hair. So I ended up then going down the bank assurance route. And I was offered two roles, one with HSBC and one with the Halifax. And I took the role with the Halifax. And looking back now, that was arguably one of the best decisions I've made in my life because at the Halifax, that's where I met my wife, Lucy.
Brilliant.
What I really enjoy about the role is helping clients from different careers, different backgrounds, and living in Singapore for many years, and now Dubai. As you can imagine, meet some really, really interesting people, and it's. The part of the role which I really enjoy is that tax planning piece, that long-term tax planning piece. Because a lot of people will say to me when I sit down with them, "What do you mean about the tax planning? Here in Dubai there is no tax. What do you mean?" So it's a case of then explaining to them about the longer-term benefits of that. And then when you dial into that, I think when we're advising clients who are working in the industry, so bankers, fund managers, people who are managing money for a living, I find it really interesting when we actually get time to sit down with them and explain how the structures that we work with can make such a massive difference to their financial planning.
Yeah. Great stuff, Dave. And I can see how getting into the financial advice world certainly benefited you from a home life perspective as well.
It did, yeah.
It's a great story. And obviously today's podcast, we're looking around defining retirement and potentially looking at professionals that want to retire earlier. You talked about long-term tax planning, and I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit further down the line. But when somebody comes to you as a client or a potential prospect and they start talking to you about retiring early, what are some of the challenges that you feel these people face when looking to retire sooner rather than they'd originally planned?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think the main goal there is to understand for clients to understand exactly how much they would actually need in retirement, how much they actually plan for that retirement to have that independence, have that financial independence in retirement. And I think there's it's also really about lifestyle choices. So what I mean by that is a case of then, I would ask, okay, what do you see yourselves doing in retirement? I've never heard anybody turn around to me and say, I just want to sit down and watch TV all day. That never happens. Commonly it'll be a case of, I want to go to these exotic places. I want to see the world, travel the world, whatever that might be. So then it's a case of then, okay, we'll further dialing into that. And so, when you're traveling around the world and you're boarding the flight, do you want to turn left or do you want to turn right? Because, to try and get an understanding of the cost involved in this. So if you're flying first class or if you're flying business class, then the cost involved in doing that is going to be very different to if you were flying around the world in economy.
Absolutely. So you talked about that long-term piece again, in that kind of articulation there. You're looking at their future goals, their future plans. What does retirement look like for them? I can imagine within that there's some tools that you would need to use to obviously plan for that early retirement. And throughout these podcasts, one of the common elements that's come up time and time again is around cash flow modeling. So just from your perspective, how do you utilize cash flow modeling in that way to help clients understand when they can retire and how much they need for their future retirement?
Yeah, sure. So cash flow modeling, it's a great tool to turn abstract goals into clear visual plans. So that's a great tool that we can actually use with clients. On top of that as well, what I do in meetings when I'm in the office, I'll be on the whiteboard, and I'll draw the client's lifeline. Okay,
right,
so in case of, look, this is where you are today. This is where we're trying to get to, and this is what potentially may happen along the way. So if you're going to be in the UK, moving to the UK in 5 or 10 years' time, that's when higher tax is going to be coming in, and we'll plot that. And then the other thing is we would then go, okay, well, these are the children's ages. So when we plan this, if for argument's sake, the clients turn around and say, look, I want to retire early, I want to retire at the age of 50. Okay, we'll look at that in the future. At the age of 50, okay, well, your youngest child is going to be 15 years old. So if that's the case, hopefully our children will become financially independent of us by the time they're after university, about 21, touch wood. That's not always the case, obviously, but then the conversation might be, okay, well, how are we going to plan for this? Because when you retire early at 50, if your kids are 15 years old, the youngest child is 15 years old, there's another 5, 6, 7 years plus of years which you need to then fund their education and their university fees and everything else. So the conversation might be, look, what we might need to do is we might need to push that along a little bit. Yeah. Until the kids have then eventually flown the nest.
That's interesting. I just want to touch on what you talked about, the lifeline, when you're plotting out that with a client. Do you get some quite different reactions when you look at when people can retire at the current state of play of what they're doing at this moment in time? And I would just be fascinated to know what sort of different, reactions you probably get from clients.
Yeah, so interestingly, I would say 9 times out of 10, when I've actually drawn the lifeline on the board, clients also say to me, look, can I take a picture of it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right,
they would want to take a picture of it because it is really, really valuable. It helps you see, the assets that you need to build up to have that income. Because when you've retired, there's no more income coming in from your employment, obviously. So what the conversation needs to be around how we get that level of income back up to a level that they have been accustomed to, which is then links into their lifestyle and what they plan on doing in their retirement and everything else. And so actually seeing it all in one place, like one snapshot, that with the retirement plan, with what they may need for their healthcare, private healthcare planning and things like that. I think it really does add a lot of value to people's planning, which is probably why they all take pictures.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I'm a very visual person, so seeing that out there would really help me. And the second and most important question from my perspective, I'm asking for a friend, by the way, here, David. Yeah. Do children ever become financially independent, should I say?
That's the other thing. So that's a really good point, Danny, because then you've got the old bank of mum and dad, because you may want to then plan for the children's education, but then after that as well. So it could be a case of investing now to then give the kids money to get on the property ladder when they're in their 20s, 30s, or whatever it might be. But yeah,
okay. I'll tell my friend to keep saving then. Yeah. So just going on to what we're discussing, and the healthcare keeps coming up time and time again in conversations, in kind of like the line of work that we do. And obviously it brings more to the furor here in the UAE, purely on the healthcare costs. So how do you help clients plan for those what can be overlooked costs in the future?
Yeah, sure. So first thing, the most important thing is plan for it. Most expats they're employed, so they'll be part of a company scheme, for example, with private medical insurance. But first of all, then look at that and make sure that the cover that you have with the company is it's enough for your family needs. Over and above that, not just with the private medical insurance, you've also got life cover, critical illness cover. So with an employee, with a lot of employment contracts, that you would have a death in service policy with it.
Yeah.
Is that enough? In my experience, it's generally not. And even if it is, it also makes sense to have a separate private insurance, because that cover is actually linked to your current employment. So, if you're in a situation where you lose your job, then your insurance goes with it. If you're headhunted, okay, so for better career prospects, but then the benefits are going to be different. So it's really important to look at that. The other important fact with that when it comes to insurances is they become more expensive as you get older. So so
yeah, absolutely.
Happy birthday, your insurance premium is going to go up. So that's why it is important to actually address it as early as possible. Because like I said, it does get more and more expensive. The other thing to then consider is as an expat, if you then repatriate back, so for example, we're both British, so if we repatriate back and we end up back in the UK, have we got a private cover there when we go back? Depends what you go. If you go back as an employee, you've gone back to retire or whatever. And we have the NHS in the UK. So then we say, well, what's the state of the NHS at the moment? The NHS is in the news quite a lot because of long waiting times and everything else. But then we have health tech, we have AI. So the NHS could be in a much better position than it is today and future. But the point is, we just don't know. So we don't know what the NHS is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years time. So would we then want to be reliant on that when we go back? Personally, in our own family, we've had a really positive experience with our family in the UK with the NHS, and quite a negative one. The positive one was a family member who was, unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer, but all the treatment and everything all went to plan. There was no delays or anything else, and everything worked really, really well. On the flip side, only a year before, so single diagnosis, yes, it was a different cancer.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, they were in hospital 4 times, and three of those times they weren't able to be warded in a bed for the first night they were in hospital. So you really, really need the care, obviously, as you get older. So then the conversation is, well, do you want to then rely on it? And the worry then is like I said, what's the NHS going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years time. So when we relate that to financial planning, it could be a case of, look, okay, well, this is what I will then want to build up the assets to pay for the lifestyle for that retirement I want. But you might also want to consider something separate investing, which is then potentially then to pay for private medical care when you're older.
Yeah, I think it's an absolute great point, and it's often overlooked, like you said. But such an important thing that people need to consider as part of the retirement strategy, because, as you said, it can derail you in that aspect. I want to now just touch on what we class as, I suppose, beyond pensions. Pensions has always been a standard retirement strategy for people, and over here in the UAE, it's very different. And we've always been brought up around diversification. So, what other tax efficient structures would you be talking about with clients to A, diversify, and then B, look at tax efficiency if they're looking to repatriate back to, their home country, wherever that might be? Yeah,
sure. So, as an expat, we can take advantage of tax efficient structures while we are living as an expat. And I find in my experience over the years, a lot of people have said, look, my plan was to think about the UK, planning for the UK just before I go back. And it's only then when we actually explain, okay, well, if you structure the investments in this way, generally the longer you hold the investments, those tax efficient structures before then repatriating back, it can make a massive difference to one's financial planning. The structures available are really tax efficient. And if you think about it, anything we can save our clients in tax it's free money. It's extra money we can make available to our clients without that having to go on tax.
So that's great in terms of those tax efficiency structures, David. There's also a kind of like a human side of retirement planning that we also need to consider. So what are the kind of things that clients will often share with you, either emotionally, or practically in the sense of them looking to retire?
Yeah, so sure. So retirement isn't all about numbers. It can be emotional. I think it could be emotional and stressful if you don't really understand. If you don't really understand how much you'd need for retirement, what that then looks like. But I think from a non-financial aspect, the conversation is, which can be quite interesting with couples, is around the location on where they actually plan on retiring. If they agree or disagree, is one thing. But let's just say you have a couple. Again, we'll do an example of a British expat, and they have the family home in the UK. They know that they are going to go back there. They're going to retire there, and then we can plan for that. So when it comes to location, there'll also be people who don't plan on going back to the UK whatsoever, and it's okay, that's absolutely fine. Then I'll say, well, where do you think your children will go to university? Probably the UK. Oh, okay, interesting. So then what would then happen then if the kids then graduate from uni in the UK? They start their careers there. They settle down there. Fast forward a few years, maybe not necessarily in the early retirement, maybe in the later years of retirement. Oh, you've then got grandkids. So if you are an expat and you've got grandkids in the UK, that's going to be a massive pull back to the UK, even though the plan was never to go back. So I think that's a really interesting point. And then the other side would be, I think could also be quite stressful for people, is if they just don't know. They're like, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to retire. And then I'll be like, okay, well, that's fine. I would also turn around and always turn around then and just go, okay, well, give me the top three locations. And they might go, maybe the UK. I really love the Mediterranean, Southern Europe, somewhere in the Med. And our favourite holiday destination is Thailand. Okay, right, let's work with that. So then it's a case of, the highest cost of let's just look at the example of the UK and Thailand, for example. So potentially there's more tax in the UK, and the cost of living in the UK is much higher than what it is in Thailand. So therefore, what we would then suggest is plan for the UK, because if you end up in the UK, you're fine because we've planned for it. If you plan for the UK but you end up retiring in Thailand, okay, great. You're going to be in a great position financially. So the worst thing to do would be the other way around. You plan for Thailand and you end up in the UK.
But what happens if you plan the other way around? No, thank you for that. I'm going to put you on the spot here with a question. So what is the one piece of advice you would give a professional, or maybe whatever role or step in life that they're currently working towards at this moment in time? What piece of advice would you give them for anybody looking to retire early?
Yeah, okay. Plan early, get advice, consider things outside of pensions, think about healthcare as well, and do my lifeline.
What's clear is that early retirement isn't about stopping work tomorrow. It's about preparing for the life you want to live with clarity and confidence. For anyone listening, if you're thinking about retiring early or just want to know how to build flexibility into your future, we hope this conversation is giving you practical insights to get started. Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Numbers.